Alrighty, welcome back, everyone. We just talked about if Oklahoma was ready for the SEC. It's going to be a little bit of a tightrope walk, but I like where Brent Venables and Oklahoma is at going into the future. But let's start to break down the transfer portal. And it's about 3 weeks since this thing is closed, but there are still some names out there that are just hanging around that are waiting to make their decision. That being said, we had a big time weekend for commitments. We had some big time players come off the board, some players that I'll be totally honest, I did not know the name of, but I absolutely should have because there are some big time guys out there that were picked up this weekend. And let's start with Michigan. They entirely rebuilt that defensive backfield. I don't know what has happened throughout that spring. I thought they were in a relatively good position. Obviously, losing Rod Moore does not help that by any means, but I didn't think they were going to do what they did this weekend, which is add four DBs to their roster from the transfer portal. It starts with Amir Hall, an FCS All-American from Albany a year ago, a very, very talented kid, 5 interceptions. And when you put him across from Will Johnson, one of the best corners in the entire country, you probably have a good amount of success. As you remember, Albany is where Jared Verse came from before he went over to Florida State. So there's no question that some of those guys can compete at a very high level right away. So very excited to see what Amir Hall can do. Wesley Walker is a guy that we talked about in relation to LSU last week. Well, he's committed to Michigan. I don't know where that happened. They came out of the clouds to grab him up, but this is an absolute vet. He has played a very, very long time and a very big pickup for them, especially with Rod Moore going down with an injury. You need that leadership at the safety position, and this might just be the guy to do it. Then you add someone like Jaden Mangum, who might be right up there with him in terms of vet leadership. He was a second team All Big Ten safety a year ago at Michigan State, and icing on top of the cake from taking him from one of your rivals is you stole him from one of your rivals in Ohio State. Nebraska was also in on this kid, so a huge pickup for Michigan there. Both those safeties are going to be big time players, but why not add another one, right? They added Ricky Johnson, a safety from UNLV, a very talented guy, had 7 pass breakups a year ago, and has played a lot of really good football in his past. And with the recruiting, the development ability and the ability within that room at Michigan, I think he's going to be even better player for them. But add that to Will Johnson, J.D. McBurrows, J.R. Hill. It's going to be a mean group. There's no two ways about that. This Michigan defense is going to be one of the best in the country, as we have become very accustomed to over the last little bit. And then we had another very interesting thing happen over the weekend, which is Ole Miss's running back room became the most crowded thing in the entire world. I don't know what the plan is, but as of right now, they're all over the place. Obviously, you had Quinshon Judkins leave, and there were some Ole Miss fans that were a little bit worried about how they would replace him and how they would get that production back. Well, they're bringing in 4 guys to do it, so I think they'll be more than fine there. You do get Ulysses Bentley back, who I think will be the starter there, but added Logan Diggs in the winter portal from LSU, added Henry Parrish from Miami in the spring portal, and you thought they were done there. They were not. For whatever reason, they were not. Rashad Amos is a guy that took a nice little vacation around the country over the last couple of weeks. He left Miami of Ohio, was a fantastic player there. Committed to Mississippi State after about 2 weeks there. He decided to decommit and commit to Colorado. After about a week there, he decided to decommit and commit to Ole Miss. So a little bit of buyers beware on that one, I will say that, but definitely a very talented player, and if he can set his feet and stick around in Ole Miss for a minute, I think he'll be more than talented for them. And then you added one more guy, Dominic Thomas, a very talented running back out of Georgia State. I think this is one that he'll likely sit until there's more room opening up in that room, and he'll probably hit the ground running in 2025. But the snap allocation for this year at the running back position is going to be nothing short of a nightmare for Lane Kiffin. I'll be totally honest. I don't know how you get all these guys the carries that they want. I don't know how you even remotely get close to getting these guys the carries that they want. I think Ulysses Bentley is the best running back in the room. I think it's by a relatively comfortable margin. So I think he'll be the guy, but it could just be all of them get 5 carries a game and you do some weird ways. But Lane Kiffin has something rolling around in his head, and far be it from me to tell him that he's wrong, that's for sure. But a couple other commitments that happened over the weekend. We had a couple of wide receivers come off the board. The two biggest guys, Michael Harrison Pilot is a very, very talented speedster out of Houston. He is committed to Texas Tech, a huge pickup for Texas Tech. That wide receiver group just keeps getting better and better. You add him to Micah Hudson. They had a guy come over from Washington State that I'm blanking on the name right now. I don't know why. But a very talented group nonetheless. Caleb Douglas, a guy that came over from Florida, is another one there. But a very, very talented group that Josh Kelly is the wide receiver from Washington State. My apologies. But another wide receiver that came off the board was Elijah Badger, the Arizona State product. He is committed to Florida. This is one we fully expected, but adding him to the Trey Wilsons of the world is going to be a mean duo. There's no two ways about that. It's another thing that makes me feel a little bit interested in Florida. I'm not necessarily betting on anything with them, but I don't know, man. There's something happening in Gainesville. I'll say that. Andrew Paul is a running back from Georgia that you might have seen during the spring game. Had a great game that day. Entered the portal and has committed to Jacksonville State. That is not at all where I thought he would end up. I thought it would be a Power 5 program, to be totally honest with you, but he's going to light the world on fire. He might be the story when we talk about smaller schools in the upcoming year. He might just do incredible things at Jacksonville State. So very excited about that. Caden Proctor has officially enrolled back in Alabama. So not really news there. We all knew that was going to happen, but finally is in writing and he is back on campus. A weird spring for him for sure, but definitely back where he probably should be in Tuscaloosa. And then you go to Michigan State. They added a couple of big-time cornerback commits in Nakai Martinez from UCF and Jeremiah Hughes from LSU. They also got Samaje Bridgman from a linebacker from Michigan. This might not be a starter this year, but definitely could be a star for them in the future. Washington added a big-time DB, and Cameron Broussard from Sacramento State was an All-Big Sky player a year ago. Probably will start for them this upcoming year as they're going to need a couple of guys on that back end, that's for sure. The D-line got another guy off the board in Brandon Lane from Stephen F. Austin, a very talented kid, was committed to Michigan State, decommitted, is now committed to Louisville. So a very talented kid, and Jeff Brom absolutely needed him with Jermaine Lole walking out the door. But let's get into some other guys that are still on the board, and to be totally honest, there's not a ton to break down in terms of where these guys are going. A lot of the stuff that I've said in the past still holds true. Oklahoma is still looking for an interior defensive lineman to replace Jermaine Lole after he decommitted and went to Texas. They're looking at Aiden Huntington, the ULM transfer. They're looking at Chris Hardy, a Jacksonville State transfer. Both very talented kids, and OU needs to land one of them. I'll say that very confidently because the reality is Dominic Williams is going to be one of their starters. Whoever they pick up in these next, little bit will likely be the second starter in that interior defensive line. So it'll be interesting to watch that. Tyler Barron is as confusing as ever. LSU just entered the conversation with USC and Miami, so not super sure where he'll end up. I'm leaning Miami, but that's just kind of a gut feeling more than anything else. Kobe Minor's a very talented safety out of Indiana that we thought the commitment was done, but sounds like it's not. He's bouncing around a little bit. I think he was at Michigan State recently. So this is a very talented kid that absolutely will be a game changer for someone. Khalil Jacobs is someone we've talked about a little bit, is bouncing around some SEC schools right now, was at Ole Miss most recently, and definitely would be a big-time player for them. So there's still players on the board that absolutely will have a big-time effect on their team that might just be starters for their team wherever they end up playing. But the reality is, I'm a little bit sick of talking about this transfer portal cycle. I'll be totally honest. This is likely the last full update that we'll do, and we'll kind of sprinkle in some different things on some shorts on YouTube or just in the show, letting you know where these guys end up because there are some big-time players there, but no need to kind of break this down any further. All these guys are kind of kicking around the same type of schools that they've been for the last couple of weeks. So we'll wait on decisions, obviously, and fill you in as they come, but probably the last time we'll do a big-time transfer portal, big board types segment on here. But a crazy cycle, definitely one that I expected to be just a little bit crazier, I'll be totally honest with you. But at the end of the day, it was off the walls. There were tons of big-time players that went around. that are going to be huge for their teams. Damian Martinez probably at the top of that list. Simeon Barrow Jr. down at Miami as well. You had Derek Harmon up at Oregon. You have tons of really good players. Javion Cole over at Texas. A lot of really, really talented players that came off the board that will play big-time parts on their team. So that spring portal that used to be kind of just a formality and just guys leaving that really wouldn't have that big of an effect or just not that big of a story turned out to be a big time story this time around. So it'll be interesting to see if that continues into next year, but we'll figure that out as it comes, obviously. But we're going to take our last break here. When we come back, we're going to talk about a Top 10 Tuesday, and we're going to go back to College Football 25. It is really all that I want to talk about right now, if I'm being totally honest. Cannot be more excited about this game, but I'm going to give you my top 10 players that I am most excited to play with in this upcoming game, whether that's a quarterback that I'm excited to make wild plays with, a defender. I tried to get a couple of defenders in there, although, we're all excited about playing offense. There's no two ways about that, but tried to include some defenders in there, and it's an interesting list, but I like it a lot. So definitely stick around, and we'll be right back with that.